And then he looks at me dead in the eyes and says, "If it was up to me, I would never let you leave my country and I would tie you up in my basement." What's up, guys? As a travel creator, I prefer to showcase the most positive aspects of my experiences while traveling, but since I like to keep it real with you guys, it doesn't feel well balanced to go on without mentioning that travel is not always sunshine and rainbows. If you don't already know, I am currently writing my first ever book, which you can get a free preview of in the description below, and it's about my experiences becoming the youngest person to travel to every country in the world. And to give that some context, more people have been to outer space than have traveled to every country, and of those 200 or so people, less than 10% of them have been women. And there might just be a reason for that. Writing this book has been pretty exhausting, to be honest, because it's caused me to relive all of the things that have happened to me while traveling, and it's bringing up all of these really creepy and downright sketchy experiences that I've had to block out of my memory and suppress for years. Normally, whenever TV interviewers or random people would ask me about my journey and if anything bad has ever happened to me, I developed this completely automated response where I would just say, "Oh, absolutely not. There's kindness everywhere. There's so much good in the world, and I have been to every country and I'm still standing here. So how bad could it have really been?" While overall those statements are absolutely true, writing this book has made me realize the extent of the harassment I've experienced as a woman while traveling in every country in the world, regardless of the region. So in this video, I want to share 4 really creepy stories that I've experienced while traveling, as well as sharing my battle-tested advice for how to stay safe and avoid most problems while on the road. And trust me, there are several more serious experiences on this topic that I will be detailing in my upcoming book, so be sure to sign up for my newsletter to stay notified on when that will be available. And let's jump into the first story. Oh wait, actually, let's have a quick disclaimer first. I want to be very clear that I do not believe that the actions of a few bad men should necessarily reflect on a country as a whole, nor do I think that it should discourage women from traveling as a whole. But I do believe that knowledge is power, and being transparent can help lead to accountability and change. So now let's get started. One of my absolute earliest memories of sexual harassment while traveling was actually in India when I was around 14 years old and traveling there with my family. While I was there, it was one of the hottest temperatures I have ever experienced, 100% humidity, and being a kid, I wore shorts without realizing what kind of attention that would attract. There were men following me. Every single man I passed on the street would make dead eye contact with me, and then his eyes would just drop down to my body, and it made me feel like I was doing something wrong to them for making them feel that way. Even though I was a kid, it finally made sense about why women in other cultures don't want to leave the house without a male family member escorting her. I remember them following me. There were people taking my photo from across the street and trying to catch up with me so that they could take photos closer. The worst part was in the eyes. It was almost like they were burning holes in my skin, and I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong other than just walking down the street with my family in the middle of the day. If that sounded uncomfortable to you, hold on to your seats because there are 3 more stories coming in this video. There are actually so many potentially scary situations that smart travelers should be aware of. But thanks to the sponsor of this video, Surfshark, internet safety does not need to be something you're worried about. Let's be honest, the internet can be a scary place. While traveling or even just working at a local cafe, I'm constantly using public Wi-Fi, and those locations can be gold mines for hackers. But thankfully, Surfshark is an easy-to-use app or browser extension that allows you to access the internet from a different country. Surfshark encrypts and protects your connection so you can be safe while checking your banking or anything else you want to keep private. When I travel, I always have a cell phone and my laptop, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of both, but fortunately, Surfshark allows you to connect an unlimited number of devices to your account so you can keep all of them safe from hackers. I also use Surfshark so I can easily change my virtual location to another country to watch Netflix shows that I can't watch in my country or access websites and social media accounts despite any censorship regulations. They offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you want to protect yourself while on the internet, you can try it risk-free and also support my channel at the same time. And as if it couldn't get any better than this, Surfshark is offering you 83% off plus 3 extra free months when you use my discount code Limitless at checkout. The link is in the description below if you're interested to learn more. Again, huge thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and thanks to Brooke here for being my creepy hacker dude and taking one for the team. Now let's get back to these ridiculous travel stories that happened in real life. Alright guys, back to story time. These next 2 stories come from when I was traveling in West and Central Africa. When I was in this part of the world, it became all too common to have immigration officers harassing me every single time I was going in or out of a country. They would usually start by asking if I was there to find a husband. Then they would condescendingly look down on me and ask, "Oh, look at this young girl traveling without a husband." Then they would slide me their contact information so that they could help me find a husband while I was in their country. I would just roll my eyes and laugh it off because even though I found it highly inappropriate and disrespectful, I thought maybe it was cultural, and since it wasn't actively threatening my safety, I just let it slide. But I did have 2 particularly awful immigration stories from this part of the world, and I'm going to tell you guys about it because there needs to be some kind of accountability for the official government employees who are treating female travelers like this. I'm sure I'm not the first woman to experience this, and unfortunately, I won't be the last. The first story is from Guinea-Bissau. I had landed in the country and of course filled out the classic immigration form. It's pretty standard for most countries. They ask you your full name, your passport information, where you're staying, your contact information, etc. I had filled out this form, and when I walked up to the immigration officer to get my passport stamp, I handed in my passport and the form, and he began asking me a bunch of questions more about what my plans were in the country, why I was there, if I was gonna be with anyone, if I was gonna travel anywhere else than where I had listed on the form. I thought it was a little odd, but I figured it was more of a secondary questioning since they probably don't get a ton of solo female travelers here. So I didn't think too much of it. I did notice that he was scribbling down my answers and my information on a separate piece of paper, which is odd, but he stamped my passport and then he gestured for me to walk with him to where the luggage terminal was. And as we're walking through there, I didn't have any checked bags, so he just walked with me, making conversation all the way out to the curb of the airport, which I thought was getting really weird. He was still holding my passport, and I didn't understand why we were outside now. And then he started asking me to come this way because his car was just around the corner in the parking lot and that he would give me a ride to my hotel. That's when I realized that this was the most ridiculous violation of power in this situation that I had ever been in. He was holding my passport, asking me to come into this dark, secluded corner to like go with him to my hotel. It felt so violating. I asked him to just give me my passport back. He handed it back to me, and I went, of course, to the official taxis and just went that way. I was so upset that he had been trying to almost manipulate me in that way because he had my passport still. And then I was terrified the entire time I was there because, of course, I was honest about where I was staying, and there was no more affordable hotels that I could move to. And the entire time I was in the country, I was so afraid that this man or anyone he told about me would come and find me at my hotel. And it ruined my entire trip for fear of being stalked or kidnapped or something crazy. When you're alone at night in these hotel rooms, you can't help but imagine worst case scenarios. And it was just one of the most ridiculous experiences I had ever had with anyone relating to an immigration officer. And I thought that was bad enough until my next immigration story, which was when I was leaving Ghana. When you leave any country, you need to get your passport stamped out before you can go board the plane. So I was in line to get my passport stamped, walked up to the immigration officer, and he looks me up and down a couple of times, just really gross, honestly, and looks at my passport, is really taking his time with it, and then he looks at me with no sarcasm, dead in the eyes, and says, "If it was up to me, I would never let you leave my country, and I would tie you up in my basement." That was one of the most awful things anyone has ever said to me in my life. I wish I could have a video recording of my reaction to that because I'm pretty sure my jaw just dropped open. I've never been threatened like that before. Like, how could this man get it in his mind when he sees a young woman by herself in the middle of the day, in the middle of an airport at his job, that he could say something like that and have it be okay? And this, keep in mind, was in hearing distance of his colleagues. So he was completely comfortable saying this on the job. I don't even remember what my response was to that because I was speechless, but he then just stamped my passport and handed it back to me, and I just walked away, like mortified and terrified of imagining that scenario of being tied up in someone's basement. It was just so inappropriate. I'm upset that I didn't report it, but since I was leaving the country, I didn't want to think about what this man had just told me, and I just wanted it to be over as soon as possible. So I didn't say anything, but I wish I had because it's just unacceptable. Alright, well, I may have saved my most anger-inducing story for last, and this one is coming from Indonesia. I was traveling for work in a rural area of the country called Raja Ampat. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my entire life. It's by far the most incredible diving capital of the world, and as I was leaving, since it's such a rural island, you need to take a ferry to the closest island that has an airport. So along with all of the people I'd been working with, we all hopped on a ferry and we're heading back to the main island. As soon as we arrived on the main island, the ferry workers had opened the doors to all of their buddies or something and just let 50 locals get on the ferry to bombard the 15 or so passengers to act as porters and carry their luggage. While this one man was trying to rip my carry-on out of my bag, which I never let anyone touch my bag ever, I never let my bags get out of my sight, and so I was fighting with this man to let go of my carry-on, and while I was doing that, this other man slips up from behind me and starts groping me. I had never had anyone touch me without my consent outside of some stingy nightclub, and as soon as I felt someone touching me in this crowded, hot, it was disgusting because of all the body odor, on this ferry. It was just such a stressful situation. I turned around and started screaming at this man not to touch me. And it definitely kind of alarmed all of the people that I had been working with for the past 10 days because I'm a low energy person, not one to scream. I've never screamed at really anyone in my life like that before, but I screamed into this man's face never to touch me again. And as I turned back around to go back to defending my possessions, he starts grabbing me again, this time even more aggressively. I have never gotten closer to being in a fight in my entire life. I have never been that angry. I've never felt it just like bubble up to the point where I need to hit someone. I've never felt genuinely like I want to hit someone before. I've done boxing, I've done MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've rolled around with people in a practice setting, but I've never been angry to the point where I've like stepped up on someone. And I stepped into this guy's face like I was just about to get in a fight. And reality kind of came crashing down as everyone was moving past and trying to squeeze through this really narrow doorway to get off of the boat. And I just swallowed my anger, got my stuff, and just got off of this boat. And as soon as we turn around, we realize that while that was happening, another one of these goons had stolen one of this woman who had been working with full huge suitcase full of all of the products that they were modeling, all of her camera gear, basically all of her most precious possessions. They had stolen from right underneath our noses. And this woman, this poor woman, is running around this boat dock crying, looking for the bag. It's completely disappeared. She's begging the cops that were there to help them, but obviously corruption was running deep in that area and there was absolutely no way that those cops were gonna do anything about it. Who knows, maybe they were in on it, I don't know. But it was just this horrible situation, and coincidentally, that started off, that was the morning of the worst 35-hour travel day of my life. I gotta get into that story at another time. But it was just so awful as a woman to feel like I am being grabbed and touched in a way that I did not consent to in a public place, middle of the day, when you're not expecting it. Because unfortunately, being a woman and going to nightclubs anywhere, you're on the defense for being touched all the time, and you're used to just like slapping it off because you can almost feel it coming. But when you're not in that kind of setting and it's not something that you would expect to happen, it was one of the most angry experiences I've ever had in my life. I can laugh about it now because it was just so ridiculous getting that emotionally riled up over some stupid man that wanted to lay hands on me. Unfortunately, one thing that basically every country has in common is the harassment and mistreatment of women. And in a perfect world, this kind of situation wouldn't exist, but it does. However, that doesn't mean that you should be fearful or limited in your travels. It actually means quite the opposite. You should be limitless because, as I said before, knowledge is power, but it's also freedom. So now that you've heard a few of my more entertaining, creepy stories, here are some guidelines for how to keep yourself safe and feeling secure while you're traveling anywhere in the world. Right off the bat, here are two of my most important rules for solo travel. Number one, do not get intoxicated, and number two, don't go out and explore at night by yourself. These aren't the most fun rules to abide by, but ever since I started following them, I started to avoid more and more potentially serious situations, and again, I'll be diving deeper into those kind of situations in my book. In the circumstance where you do decide to go get drinks with people you met at the hostel or something, just keep a very close eye on your drink and keep a tally and time frame of how many drinks you're drinking. Just be sure to never get to the point where you're out of control. These are also super important rules to follow if you are a male traveler, because the vast majority of robberies actually happen when male travelers are drunk. It's also helpful to think about the animal kingdom. Predators prey on the weak and vulnerable, and the same goes for humans. Be awake and alert, be aware of your surroundings, have a plan, know where you're going and how you're going to get there. When your energy is strong and secure because you know where you're going and what you're doing, people generally don't want to harass someone who looks like they know how to stand up for themselves. This isn't the case 100% of the time, obviously, but it helps to have thick skin and to always be prepared. As much as I hate to admit it, it really does help to wear boring and conservative clothing because most men who harass women are drawn to exposed skin. Also, it could be extremely offensive to not dress modestly depending on the country, so always take the time to research the local customs and dress accordingly. So to sum up some of my advice, number 1, think critically and don't let your guard down. Number 2, use common sense and don't do something you wouldn't do in the bad side of your own town back home. Number 3, have self-confidence and stick up for yourself at all times because nobody else will. And 4, be alert and aware of your surroundings and your belongings. I could go on, but I think I'll wrap it up with that note. This video felt so vulnerable to make, and I've only just scratched the surface on how much I have to share about this topic. So don't forget to sign up for my newsletter in the description to be kept in the loop for when my book is finally available. Also, don't forget to check out the link to Surfshark to keep yourself protected from those creepy guys on the internet. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Definitely let me know what you thought in the comments. Don't forget to smash that like button as well to please YouTube's algorithm, and I will catch you next week.